Well, that was certainly a colorful news conference from Rudy Giuliani, but it was light on facts. So much of what he said was simply not true or has already been thrown out in court. And, Giuliani, he opened by making this really bold and baseless claim that a lot of this alleged nationwide voter fraud that he's referring to all came from one centralized place. He called it a nationwide conspiracy. And yet he failed to provide any hard evidence to back up that one specific claim, especially when you're dealing with a claim that really cuts to the core of our democratic process. Now, in Pennsylvania, Giuliani continued to claim widespread voter fraud in Philadelphia, even though he has already said in court, and I quote, "This is not a fraud case." So what he's saying in public, not under oath, is different from what he said in court. Moving on to Michigan, where the Trump campaign dropped its final federal lawsuit just this morning after two Republican canvassers in Wayne County say they now want to rescind their votes to certify the election. Giuliani says they dropped the lawsuit because the state did decertify, but that is not true. The results were certified in Michigan on Tuesday, and Biden won. As for evidence, well, Giuliani kept holding up pages and pages of what he says are sworn affidavits, hundreds of them, people claiming voter fraud and irregularities, but he's declining to show them, to show all of them at least, and listen to his explanation why.
They don't want to have their lives torn apart. I can't give you all these affidavits because if I do, these people will be harassed, they'll be threatened, they may lose their job. We have 100 more of these. I can't show them to you, because those people don't want to be harassed. They don't want to have their lives torn apart.
Now, up on that stage with Giuliani was a big poster with the headline, "Multiple Paths to Victory." But Giuliani never credibly explained a single path, let alone multiple ones.
Even Fox News isn't buying this completely unhinged alternate reality being sold by Rudy Giuliani and the rest of Trump's legal team. This on-air rebuke came after Giuliani held a press conference alleging widespread voter fraud supposedly being perpetuated in cities across the country.
To any experienced investigator, prosecutor, would suggest that there was a plan from a centralized place to execute these various acts of voter fraud, specifically focused on big cities, and specifically focused on, as you would imagine, big cities controlled by Democrats, and particularly focused on big cities that have a long history of corruption. The number of voter fraud cases in Philadelphia could fill a library. Just a few weeks ago, there was a conviction for voter fraud, and one 2 weeks before that. And I've often said, I guess sarcastically, but it's true, the only surprise I would have found in this is if Philadelphia hadn't cheated in this election, because for the last 60 years, they've cheated in just about every single election. You could say the same thing about Detroit. Each one of these cities are cities that are controlled by Democrats, which means they can get away with anything they want to do. It means they have a certain degree of control over, certainly control the election board completely, and they control law enforcement. And unfortunately, they have some friendly judges that will issue ridiculously irrational opinions just to come out in their favor.
Only the one thing that Giuliani seems to have overlooked is the part where they actually have to offer proof for any of their claims. And that's the part where he and the rest of Trump's lawyers seem to have dropped the ball. So far, Trump's legal team is 1 for 31 in court. 1 for 31. And the only case they did manage to win was in Pennsylvania, where they shortened the cure deadline in a certain Pennsylvania county from 9 to 6 days, which had zero impact on the outcome of the race. But here's the thing. While they're limited by what they can say in court without getting sanctioned, they're happy to say these things in public. Like this idea that observers were being denied entry into counting rooms, even though in court the Trump team literally admitted that they were inside, or that there was fraud, despite Giuliani himself admitting to a judge that this wasn't a fraud case. The list goes on and on, but the point is that it's easy to make outlandish claims. Clearly, it's easy to cry fraud and say that the deep state teamed up with Venezuela and Cuba and China and Hugo Chavez to execute some large-scale plan to steal the election away from Donald Trump. But if you can't prove any of that, then you're not a legal expert, you're a conspiracy theorist. Oh, and by the way, that example wasn't even hyperbole. Here's Trump's lawyer Sidney Powell describing that exact situation.
Here and uncovering more by the day. is the massive influence of communist money through Venezuela, Cuba, and likely China in the interference with our elections here in the United States. The Dominion voting systems, the Smartmatic technology software, and the software that goes in other computerized voting systems here as well, not just Dominion, were created in Venezuela at the direction of Hugo Chavez to make sure he never lost an election after one constitutional referendum came out the way he did not want it to come out. We have one very strong witness who has explained how it all works. His affidavit is attached to the pleadings of Lynn Wood in the lawsuit he filed in Georgia. It is a stunning, detailed affidavit because he was with Hugo Chavez while he was being briefed on how it worked.
Somehow, she managed to make what you see on an episode of Judge Jeanine look like actual news. But let's be real here. This was never about any actual fraud or illegal activity. The fact is that they're not so much concerned with winning in a court of law as they are with winning in the court of public opinion. That's what all of this is. It is a coordinated disinformation campaign to convince Trump supporters that the election was stolen. Not because it was. Clearly, their glaring lack of evidence is a testament to the fact that this isn't real. But they figure that if they can repeat these claims over and over and over, just like they repeated this mistaken notion that Trump was completely and totally exonerated from the Mueller report, that they can will it into existence, because their only move here, per usual, is to lie. And there are a few reasons for this. First, this is the first step in actually trying to overturn the election results. It won't work, but their effort to try and make it work relies on a public pressure campaign to get Republican officials on board. They are quite literally manipulating their own supporters and using them to try and strong-arm other Republicans into undermining the very concept of our free and fair elections. Beyond that, they're setting the stage to be able to claim that Joe Biden's presidency is illegitimate. This way they think they're justified when they inevitably try and engage in the exact same obstructionism that plagued all of Obama's presidency. The point here is that Republicans only think they're allowed to govern, and they'll do anything in their power to ensure that Democrats can't accomplish anything, even when they have a mandate to do so. They are fundamentally anti-democracy. And finally, this will help Trump retain his grip on power. So whether he wants to start some news network or even run again in 2024, if he can keep his base frothing at the mouths, then he'll try and leverage that into eyeballs or votes. Clearly, the victim of deep state voter fraud storyline garners way more enthusiasm than one-term president who lost decisively. And Trump knows that. So he'll keep up this charade because it's not about defending our democratic institutions, it's not about a smooth transition of power, it's about him and him alone. So my advice is twofold. First, don't worry about Trump's desperate power grab. It won't amount to any stolen election. And second, it's to spread facts when you can. If there was fraud, Trump's lawyers would have presented it in court. If there were illegal votes, they would have found them during the vote audits, especially in Republican-led states. If there were blocked ballot observers, the Trump campaign wouldn't have said the exact opposite to the judges. And if you think that Hugo Chavez came back from the dead to rig an election against Donald Trump, then I don't think I can help you. But in the face of so much disinformation, our job is the same as it's always been, to rely on the facts and tell the truth. If you like this video, please check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I take a deep dive into the week's most important stories and interview major players in politics, including Kamala Harris, Katie Porter, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Eric Swalwell, Mary Trump, Al Franken, Cory Booker, and many, many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.